Hey, welcome. I wanted to take a few minutes to explain the this keyword in JavaScript. I know it can be quite confusing for beginners. It's one of those things that really confused me. In fact, I got it wrong in an interview and didn't get the job. So I spent extra time studying the this keyword so that I was able to explain it the next time it was brought up in an interview. All right, so I'm going to start out by saying this in JavaScript is just like this in English. So think to yourself for a moment, what is this in English? If I tell you, hey, look at this, what am I talking about? What does this mean? The truth is that this has no meaning unless we give it some context. So if I pick up my coffee mug and I point to it and I say, look at this, you know that this is referring to the coffee mug. It's the same thing in JavaScript. I'm going to go over the 4 principles of this, and the first one I want to talk about is window binding. And window binding is when we don't give this any context. So if I open up the console here, and I'm just going to delete this, and I type this. So this returns the window to me. JavaScript says, I have no clue what this is, but maybe it's one of these things. I'm just going to give you back the whole window. Okay, this is not something we're aiming for. This is what this defaults to if we don't give it any context. So window binding, it will return the window, undefined in strict mode, or the global object in node. Okay. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to type use strict. Okay, it's just going to force me to write some cleaner code. And I am going to make a function. I'm going to call this function sound. And inside of sound, I am just going to console.log this.bark. Okay, and when I come down here and I try to invoke sound, and I save and run, I get back type error, cannot read property of bark undefined. So what this error is saying is basically, hey, you didn't tell me what this should refer to, so I don't know what this bark is. Okay, again, this is not something we aim for. This is something that this keyword will default to if we don't give it any context. So the next principle I want to get into is implicit binding. Okay, this is probably the most used principle of this, and it applies to objects with methods. And it is implied that when we invoke the function, we look to the left of the dot, and that's what this refers to. So let's see an example here. I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call it atta. Oops, const atta equals function. Sorry, object. There we go. Okay, atta's going to get a name. Her name is atta. Atta is going to get a breed. She's a poly dog. Atta is going to get a bark. Woof, woof. And Atta is going to get a method called sound, which is a function that console logs. I'm just going to move myself over here. It console.logs this.bark. Okay, so now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to invoke sound. So I'm going to say atta.sound, and I need my parentheses to invoke my function. Okay, so invoking the function. If I clear, save, and run, now I should get woof woof back in the console. So what's happening here? What's happening is that when we invoke the function sound, we look to the left of the dot, and that's what this refers to. So this bark refers to Ada's bark, which is woof woof. And that's why we're getting woof woof back in the console. All right, so that's implicit binding. It's implied that whatever is to the left of the dot when the function is invoked, that's what this refers to. Then we have explicit binding. Explicit binding. Okay, explicit binding, we explicitly tell JavaScript what this keyword word should refer to using .call, .apply, or .bind. So with .call, we pass in our arguments one by one, and it immediately invokes the function. With .apply, we pass in our arguments as an array, and it immediately invokes the function. And with .bind, we pass in our arguments one by one. It does not immediately invoke the function. Instead, it returns a brand new function that can be invoked later. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. I'm going to go back to my example of Ada. So I'm going to make Ada, so const Ada equals an object with a name Ada with a breed Bolly dog and with a bark woof woof. And above Ada, I'm going to make a function called sound, and this function is just going to console.log this.bark. Okay, so I am now going to invoke this function with .call. So I'm going to say sound.call, and I'm going to pass in Ada. Okay, and I should see back in the console, woof woof. There we go. So this sound, or this bark, is Ada's bark because I am explicitly passing Ada in here as an argument. Okay, and the function is invoked immediately. You can see that when we ran this, it was being invoked right here. So I'm invoking the function. Invoking the function. Okay, if I wanted to use this with .bind, I could make a new function. So const good dog equals sound.bind, and I'm going to pass in Ada. Okay, so if I clear, save, and run, nothing is happening here. Why is nothing happening? Because .bind does not immediately invoke the function. Instead, it returns a brand new function that can be invoked later. So our brand new function is called good dog, and we can invoke good dog anytime we want to. So I can come down here and invoke good dog. And now if I save and run, I should get woof woof back in the console. Awesome. All right, finally, the fourth principle of this is new binding. And new binding says that when a function is invoked as a constructor function, using the new keyword, this points to the newly created object. So when a function is invoked as a constructor using the new keyword, this points to the newly created object. At this point, you might be asking, what is a constructor function? That's a great question. A constructor function is a function that constructs new objects. That is its whole life's purpose. I like to think of a constructor function as like a template for new objects. And how can you tell that you're using a constructor function? Usually you'll see a capitalized function name. usually you'll see an assignment of the this keyword, and you likely will not see a return statement inside of a constructor function. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Function pet. I'm going to pass in the pet's attributes, which are name, breed, and bark. And so I'm going to say this.name equals name, this.breed equals breed, and this.bark equals bark. Okay, I want to introduce you to one more keyword. So outside of the function, I'm going to say pet.prototype.sound equals function, and I'm going to console.log this.bark. Okay, I'm using prototype here to abstract the sound method outside of the pet function. The reason why I'm doing this is to save on memory issues, and that still means that sound can be passed through every new object that is created out of the pet function. So it is still available to thousands of objects, but it is not being painted every time a new object is invoked. Okay, so let's invoke the constructor function of pet. So we're going to say const atta equals new pet, and we're going to pass in as arguments her name, her breed, and her sound. Okay, so when a constructor, or when a function is invoked as a constructor using the new keyword, okay, that's happening here, this points to the newly created object. So if we console.log atta, you're going to see that we're going to get an object back here. So the name is atta, the breed is bolly dog, the bark is woof woof. So this name now refers to the arguments that we've passed in atta, this breed refers to bolly dog, this bark refers to woof woof. And if we wanted to make atta say her sound, we could say atta.sound, and we will get back woof woof. All right, I hope that this short tutorial was helpful. Let me know in the comments.